I'll give you a brief introduction to who I am, who we are at Covet, the whole esteemed panel that we have with us today. I am Saras Rachapalli. I'm the CEO and founder of Cover.art. We are a creative gallery showcasing and representing some of the most exciting and really groundbreaking emerging artists and talents coming out of universities, leading universities in London and the UK. And we are very excited to share with you that we are launching a new feature on our website called the Art Vault. We are always showcasing some of the most, as I mentioned, artists who are making the mark in the contemporary art world. We have curated shows, always aligned or even a step ahead of the zeitgeist. We have launched our platform earlier this year in the midst of the pandemic, but received some great feedback thanks to all our collectors, press, and art institutions. We've been recognized by the Creative Industries Council as ones to watch, and we are under the mentorship of the Mayor of London's office. Our artists have been recognized by Sotheby's and VIP Photo London in a very short period of time, and many, many more. And here we are with a very exciting panel of renowned interior designers, Hazel Collins, Martin LaRoche, and a wonderful and eminent art historian, art advisor, and art critic, Mirta Diargenzio. And quickly and briefly introduce everyone, and of course our very own Camilla Grimaldi, who is our Chief Art Officer at Cover.art. What I will do is quickly introduce everyone, and I'll have Cami introduce herself because she's a part of our team, and then we'll get started. So why don't I go ahead introduce Hazel first. She is the founder of Hazel Collins Design, a London-based interior design firm working across high-end residential and commercial projects, UK and internationally, and experienced in not only designing historic but also contemporary buildings. She has a very versatile and relevant taste, and she has a flair for incorporating art into spaces. As you can already see, she's in a wonderful space at home, and she's an art collector herself. Hello, Hazel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next, we have Martin LaRoche, who founded his interior design practice, Martin LaRoche Interior Design, based in Geneva. Back in 2013, he founded it and focuses on artistic direction for large-scale projects, as well as interior design, home decor, lighting, design objects, but most importantly, incorporating art into spaces. And interestingly, Martin has worked across continents, from Paris to Spain to Egypt and Cairo. So we'd love to know more about your experiences shortly, Martin. Thank you so much for joining us, Martin.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And Mirta Diargenzio, she has worked with many contemporary artists, some of the blue chip artists, including Damien Hirst, Gilbert and George, also Robert Rauschenberg, and many other artists, Douglas Gordon, Jan Faber, and so on, and curated some of the very exciting shows in both Italian and international museums, and organized and co-curated first retrospective of Damien Hirst in Naples, in Museo Archeologico Nazionale in Naples. And she's been the VIP relationships manager at Art Basel for the past 10 years. So that's wonderful to have Mirta as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Mirta.
Thank you for inviting me in this new community that sounds really exciting, and I'm very proud to be here tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mirta. And then back to our very own Camilla. If you are able to briefly introduce yourself to our audiences and also tell us a bit more about the exciting project, the Art Vault, which is launching very soon on December 9th online on our space, www.cover.art. So please go ahead, Cami.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you to all panelists, which I know very well because you're also very good friends of mine, and we've been also working together with some of you in the past, so it's very exciting to have you here on board. As Sarah was saying, I'm the Chief Art Officer of Cover.art, this exciting platform of curated, talented emerging artists. We just launched on the 10th of June, so it's quite a recent and exciting project. And we are here today. Well, my background, I'm an art advisor, I'm a curator, and I had for many years a photography gallery based in Florence, Rome, and London. But now I'm excited to be part, thanks to Sarah's, to this amazing new project of Covet.art. Please, after, visit our website, as Sarah was saying, www.covet.art. It's amazing. We have 8 incredible artists. But we're also here tonight, even with the collaborations of these amazing interior designers and art advisors and our critique, to how can we collaborate together. And we can collaborate together because we will launch, as Sarah was saying, very soon with the Art Vault, which is a digital archive of selected and curated talented artists that we source directly from top worldwide universities, where hopefully, you know, interior designers, art advisors, even collectors will have this easy access to this archive for their homes, for corporates, for interior designers to use in their amazing projects, for architects. So we're very excited because we don't think that there is such an because we have many websites, as you know, but this is highly curated and amazing young and emerging artists from all parts of the world. So for all taste, all medium, we will have sculptures, we will have paintings, we'll have photography, we will have prints. And so imagine to have access to this amazing and powerful archive. But now I would like to leave the word to our moderator and to start this exciting dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cami. And absolutely, we are here to launch our collaborations with interior designers and art advisors. So if you're interested, please feel free to get in touch. Email us and we can get it sorted. We can have a lovely conversation. And why don't we go ahead and jump in? So tell us, we'll start with Hazel. Does art elevate space that you design, and how so? And please tell us a bit more about some exciting projects that you worked on with art and interiors. It could be blue chip artists or with emerging artists. Please share, Hazel.
Well, yes, I definitely think that art definitely elevates a space. It adds another dimension, it brings light, it brings energy with it. If you imagine me sitting here with white walls behind me, it would feel very different to sitting surrounded by pieces of art. So I feel very strongly about that. And when we work on our projects, we're always conscious about art. Sometimes we start with art from the get-go. One, I'll tell you about a couple of projects that come to mind. One, it was a client that had a really beautiful collection. She had a stunning apartment with very high ceilings, and she's quite a dramatic person. So we bought a pistoletto that was a 3-meter high, probably more than 3 meters high, because she had 15-foot ceilings. And it was a pistoletto of a director with a clapperboard in the corner. And when she came out her dressing room to get dressed, she could see herself ready to go onto the set. And it was terrific. Another one, when we're obviously always looking at the we start with the architectural layout and our plan of a project. So one, we were moving walls and we were moving a doorway, but we knew the client had a wonderful Ivan Navarro light fixture, and it was of a door, so we put it into that doorway instead of taking the door away altogether, and it was upstairs, and as you looked into it, you just looked down and down and down. It was really the perfect location for it. One more project was when we worked with Camilla. It was a beautiful house in Regent's Park, and the whole project I was thinking about, what art, where can I place the art, what would go here, what would work there. And the minute I saw this hallway, it was quite a narrow hallway but high ceilings, and I just knew that a Massimo Vitali diptych would look amazing because it added this perspective. And we put that in there, the client loved it, and it was absolutely fantastic. So there are so many opportunities.
And that is fascinating to hear, that when you think of incorporating art into space, and we'll talk shortly about where do you start, what's the starting point, does your collection become a point of focus and the starting point, or vice versa, when you have some space and you want to incorporate art in. So much to talk about. Martin, what are your thoughts? And please share more about your projects, especially your international experience, right from Cairo, and working on residential properties to boutique hotels, and there's so much. And I already see that you have a vibrant wall behind you. So
Yes.
tell us more.
So for me, yes, so the art is definitely something very, very important because it's part really of an identity and let's say the soul and the spirit of a place. So what happened to me in different projects? Let's say I could talk. As I told, yeah, I had this experience in Egypt when I was decorating a villa that was a new villa that's been just raised from absolutely nowhere, totally new, but in a more kind of a classical, let's say, volumes and organization type. The client has already a beginning of a collection, and it was so in Egypt, and it was quite interesting because the scene at the time was like merging, and we were actually looking at everything almost hand in hand, and how to compose with the space that was already there, because I was not the architect, so we had to elevate the space with the art, and it turns to be like a very interesting experience. And at the time was like a very famous artist in Egypt called Aded Siwi, that is most on the local scene, and we decided to put the painting actually really in the center of the hallway. It was like a huge 2-story hallway, and the painting was like a pretty big canvas, and it was very interesting, like to make it the center of it. So this was one of my experience, let's say, with the space and the art. And as it was also in the hallway, it was like really interesting. You just enter in the house and you had like this huge painting, and from this pretty well-known artist in Egypt. Also, it happened also that I have also to integrate really canvas also in let's say built-in furniture, and that was quite interesting. This happened more in Geneva in a project when it was like it's a Belgian artist called Dominique Fonal, and it was like 2 huge canvas sliding in a bookcase to hide a TV screen. So that was also quite interesting to work on the space. And was this furniture that was like specially made around those 2 canvases, and remotely sliding just to open the space for the TV and hiding the book on the sides, and to give a totally different space also of this part of this living room and this apartment was like from not a very particular architecture, because it was like, let's say, mid-60s, so nothing particular, because it was not at all like a renowned architect who've done it, but all this, let's say, all this setting, let's say, with this furniture and the art, totally elevated the space and totally changed the atmosphere of this pretty big part of the room.
Fantastic, and I love that you, both of you, Hazel and Martin, so far have made that kind of space come alive. And I wish, the audiences, including myself, could have a peek into these really fascinating worlds that you create. And Mirta, coming to you as with your incredible experience and expertise as an art historian, curator with major museums, and from blue chip artists to also you've worked with a few emerging artists. How has your experience been in terms of some of the projects that you've worked on with your clients, and any that stand out that you would like to share?
Sure, there are many examples, but obviously when you work closely with an artist, which is extremely interesting, because I had the opportunity of working with maestri like Gilbert and Giorgio or Rauschenberg or Cunellis, or in my generation, the English artists like Douglas Gordon or Damien Hirst. Sometimes you have to imagine for exhibition in public spaces possibilities that became true. That means that you have to deal with the dreams and the reality. Obviously, that is the case of our shows. When we did the Archaeological Museum with Damien, that was a fortunate case of a public Italian institution in Naples at the time in 2004, with a magnificent space, which was the Museum Archaeological. And I had this intuition, and it was made possible thanks to the political situation and with the help of the other co-curator, but especially of the vision of the artist. And this is a possibility for a public experience. Like Hazel was mentioning, more often in those days where we have a situation which is totally change for this emergency, we have to turn the emergency into an opportunity. So we have to dream about spaces which are private spaces sometimes of our clients. So we have to talk with them, or we have to imagine different ways of transport or collaboration. I was mentioning the experience I had with Tomás Saraceno in the days I was working for Art Basel, when I was asked as an advisory, a consultancy for a space which I never saw in Abu Dhabi for the NYU. And because I knew the work of Thomas, I had this intuition of his work in that space, which I never visited. And that was very fortunate, but this is an extraordinary case. I hope I will be able to work in the future in collaboration with interior designers, architects, and gallerists in a new community that we have to imagine that will travel in a different way.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Mirta, and thank you so much for sharing some of these insights, especially when curating these really incredible shows that people hear about and read about, and again envisioning a work of art in a space that you've never been. Again, it's what you talked about, dreams and reality, and how you power of imagination as well, which blends so beautifully. And have you worked with emerging artists, and how do you discover emerging artists?
As I was mentioning to you, we are a community, and this is a community where I always have the privilege to be very close with the artists, So to be able to visit their studio, this is where I learn more. And nowadays I keep to visit studio as I can, even for emerging artists, because you never know. I mean, Rauschenberg was saying all the time, you never know if the new Picasso will be in the street, and you just have to notice. And this is true. So I really appreciate also your covered art, because is obviously in London, where we have a lots of established university, is more easy to launch such a very interesting program in different university. But also in Italy, we have different studios of artists which we need to imagine open for us. And this is, I think, is the future challenge.
No, absolutely, Mirta. And yes, that's our vision as well, to showcase some of the most, rising and interesting talent who are pushing boundaries of what art is, redefining that, but also across media, and some very interesting narratives there. And Cami, as an art advisor, because you worked as an art advisor as well, what is interesting about working with emerging artists in terms of, for clients? Because now there is also greater ask and interest in understanding the work of emerging artists.
I think working with emerging artists is very exciting and interesting. These are the first key elements for me. It's exciting and interesting because you're collaborating, you are following from the very beginning the working process of the artist. You're seeing all the steps, step by steps, which really makes exciting, and I'm enthusiastic to see the whole procedure, the whole working process of the artist. And I think this is the right timing to start collecting emerging artists. The blue chips artists are very well known, and of course I understand whoever wants to collect them, that's perfectly fine and great. But to have an emerging artist too is like, the client is also interesting to see what the new work will be. How is he proceeding? Where is he exhibiting now? What is he doing? So there's all this aura, I can say, all this exciting behind it. So I think this is, an exciting element to it, working with emerging artists. And as I said, it's also even sharing ideas, brainstorming ideas. And this is actually what we do even with the mentoring program of cover.art, is to help them 360 degrees, not only, to help them, advise them, for example, if it's a photographer, to tier the photographs, to help them editing the photographs, but also, what is the next step? How can we put you in the market? Maybe help them in some residencies, to sign up in some interesting residencies, to help them make a book or a catalog. And Mirta knows very well how important to have a book for an artist, to have a great essay from an important curator. These are all elements that also are very exciting to work with.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for sharing that, Cami. We'll share more details about the Art Vault in a bit. But Hazel, coming back to your, again, very incredible space that I see, behind you. How did you start your own art collection, and how do you advise your clients on growing their art collection? Tell us a bit more.
So, I mean, we've got quite an eclectic collection, I have to say, and everything from photography to ceramics, which I love, to sculpture. You can see we've got Alan Jones painting and a little sculpture, which is quite unusual. And I mix everything together. I actually love mixing old with new. I think working with young artists is very exciting. It's kind of easy to go with the blue chip, although, you're spending a lot of money. Obviously, there are other risks and other things to think about. But working with young artists, you're on a journey. And I think that when I work with younger clients who are starting that journey. It's a very exciting time. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of places. I think what you're doing opens up so many opportunities for people to be able to delve in. And I think what I do, people obviously come to me because they love what we do. I have a team, we work as a team, and people trust us. So when they're building their collection, they're looking, I'm not an art advisor, but I do collect. So if they're buying blue chip, I wouldn't really advise them, because I don't know, you know, you have to know what year, what painting, why you're buying it. There are so many things involved, and actually I wouldn't want that responsibility. If it's young artists, there's still a lot to know, but I think we start off by defining, why are they collecting? What are they collecting? What's the story? Are they buying female artists? Are they buying African artists? Are they buying male artists? There's so many things to look at. And that's kind of where we start from. We understand, we work with their clients, and then we go on a journey, and we will work with the artists, take them to studios. I went with Camilla to lots of different artists, or came up to the gallery. And I think that's all part of it, because there's actually a social aspect to this. And people love going to other collectors' homes and seeing what they're collecting. And it's a kind of a language where you feel comfortable, and you're exploring and growing. And I think that the art world helps you to grow in a way you want to grow. And I don't think you have to define where you're going in a way, but also let it happen so that you're open to opportunities, because you don't know what's going to come along.
Can I just jump in? I think you said something really crucial, Hazel. It is a language. You need to define, art is a language, and you need to define this language. That makes a difference, I think. Yeah, it's a very good point.
No, absolutely. And I love that you also talked about the social element of it as well, and the curiosity around it. And when people are developing their own taste, but also their own understanding of art, either let be emerging art or blue chip. And as you mentioned, there's so many variables around it, and it's incredible that you're able to integrate and incorporate that language and make a cohesive vision around what you're developing with your spaces. And I love that you also work with emerging artists, because like you mentioned, absolutely, Hazel, there's a sense of joy of discovery as well. And following the journey as well, that's another one. And especially for not just emerging collectors, but even established collectors, to kind of challenge them, and also for them to it's an adventurous path, because you'd never know who you'll meet or what artists you'll discover. And that's what we want to bring, not only through our platform, but through these talks. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Uplifting. It's
absolutely Absolutely. And touching on that, Martin, how do you work on making your spaces come alive with art? How does your kind of vision work? I know you work with already existing collections, but also sourcing new artists and works. Tell us more about that.
So it depends totally, let's say on the client. But it's always very, very interesting to start a discussion, let's say, with a client and with art, because as we said, so it's really part of all of our work to have the art, let's say, incorporated in the design. So when we start, that happened to me when we start, let's say, from scratch with someone who wish, like to enlarge, let's say, like just like the very, very tiny collection started. It's to start a dialogue together, because for me, every time it's very, like personal and kind of unique, and it has to stick, to the personality, because most of the time I noticed, like when client is buying some art, generally it represents really something to him more than an investment. It's like a story that he wants to tell, you know, and to put on his walls, or if it's an object or a sculpture or something like this, just to have in his interiors, just to tell a story, and the story of he or her life. So I think this is very, very important to me, to have this very, let's say, to stick also to the personality. And then to develop that together. And then after, if I can jump, let's say, to the sourcing, then after we can have the opportunity to have a good connections or relation or even friendship with some gallerists or either artists. So that helps a lot. And so we can have, let's say, a direct contact with, let's say, this part of the market, and then to be totally into it and continue the dialogue with the client and the space and the project we're doing all together. And to come and also more to the point about your platform, it's also very, very, very interesting for people like me to have at our disposal this tool, because it's very easy for us to have access also to emerging artists and to propose them to our clients. Because what we have to do, and what I think what I see as an important part of my job, is like I have all the time, even if the clients, they're confident in me or in my taste or in my choice or in my views, I have always a bit, you know, to push them out of their comfort zone, of their limits. And that's what is very interesting. They can always say no, but I think it's very, very interesting for me. And I think this is the most important and interesting part of the job, is like to push them at a maximum. And so this is not only valid just for the interior design and materials and colors and everything, but also for the art. And because what I've seen also, and mainly for, let's say, young collectors, they want to go like very mainstream and everything. So okay, it can be very reassuring to have like something that is mainstream and maybe that someone else has. So, you know, you're more in the model, But I think it's very, very important, as the rest of the design and everything in interior design, to have something like a little bit maybe out of the frame and out of the mainstream. And so this is definitely part of my job, and art is definitely part of it. And I think it's very interesting to source, or to have the opportunity of sourcing different artists, emerging artists, to be part of our project.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much for walking us through that. And you mentioned a bit about the personality of your client, and understanding that a bit more, because you're right. As Cami always says as well, that you're always part psychologist as well, to understand your clients' needs and personalities and tastes, preferences pretty quickly. What is that like? And also, how would you define your style? Because of course there's an element of that, you know, your signature style, while overlaying that, or suggesting some other, you know, either design or artworks that align, you know, directly with the client. How does that work?
So I'm very eclectic, as you can see. I'm very eclectic, and so yeah, it's every time is something totally different. I don't know, it might be a bit confusing what I'm saying, but everything is everything at every time is totally different. The client, the project, the house, the style, especially that I try to force myself, not even if I have, let's say, like a main, you know, kind of style, you can tell that I've been through this project or not, but not all the time, because I've done very, very, very different things. And so for me, it's always very, very interesting to start from scratch again, put yourself again in kind of a challenge, and reconsider maybe everything that you had in mind, and restart again with a new client, with a new project. adapt also to the personality I was mentioning. So pushing the people as much as you can, but you still have to be reasonable and accept also what they want, even if it's not totally your vision. But for me, what's the most important thing is like I never do something that I don't like, or I never approve, let's say, something that I don't like that the client would buy. Then after, if the piece is already there, it's already there before me, so I'll have to deal with it, but I'll find a way to, I don't know, make it a bit different.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Martin. That sounds reasonable and also interesting that you're able to suggest that. And Mirta, tell us more about some of the, especially with your work and experience at Art Basel as a VIP strategic relationships manager. You may have, come across various, client stories, but also needs and expectations or ideas. How do you understand them, and how do you navigate it for them? And also in terms of suggesting some of the especially exciting emerging art, how does that work for you?
It's true that I had an experience that was extremely interesting for 10 years in Art Basel that came after my experience with artists, and I perfectly agree with Hazel and Martin. I mean, previously, I didn't have so many relation with collectors, but more with artists. With Basel, I started to do like VIP, like I used to call it babysitting, but in reality it became a real profound relation with collectors that became my friends. And Martin is right. Sometimes you have to push people, because when you have to choose art, you have to be also, you have to take the risk, as Hazel was saying. So with the young one, it's easier in a way, because you have to follow your instinct or your your knowledge. And it's a matter of dialogue you are able to develop with your collectors. And for me, has been always important to have the relation with the artist, but also with the artwork. So nowadays, it's more difficult to see the works in places like art fairs. So, but it's even more interesting to find alternatives way to present the work of the young emerging artists that needs to be edited in a way with your collectors or with your clients. And they became friends, the collectors. The artists also are friends, but it's true that art is a blind date in a way with the artwork. So they have to trust. They have to trust themselves, and they have to trust the art. This is my point.
That's wonderful, and that's wonderful. And you didn't mention before that you like to sometimes leave it to serendipity for you to encounter an artist, which is also such a beautiful way of discovering emerging artists or any other talent, again, internationally. And Cami, I know you wanted to share something.
Yes, I just wanted to add, I completely agree with all three of you. I mean, but I think even our role, it's very important, the role of the art advisor and the role of the interior designers, because at the end, we are there to advise. So, I mean, the client needs also to listen, because especially with emerging artists, it is instinct. First of all, you need to be curious and you need to love the piece. This is the two key elements that you must always have. But at the end, they need to listen to the art advisor that he's suggesting you. He's telling you the whole story about the artist, his working process, the whole narrative behind it. And the client needs to trust you. I think that trust, and I hope that you all agree, is the foundation of our work. Because we are there to advise, and also when they have no clue, because some clients really have no clue, you're there to tell them, yes, this is worth, and of course it's a risk, of course, but at the end, you're there to support them and to support the artist. And, you know, and not to convince them, to make them understand, because you need to spend time even with the client. Why do you think that acquiring that work is good?
I mean, if I can jump in, I think
yes,
I think it's very interesting to stimulate, let's say, I would say, to stimulate the clients. And obviously, as Camilla just said, it's like for the arts. And we have the same situation also for the design itself, for some pieces, you know, when we also like we source some special pieces, you know, from a certain designer, from a certain edition, from a certain year. So we have to stimulate, and I think this is very important.
You know what, Martin, I completely agree with what you said before, because I think that when you talk about blue chip or emerging, or even furniture and design and all the pieces, you know, it's a bit like when people dress. So fashion and interiors and art, it all is a mix. And there's a lot of people that play very safe in their dress, head to toe in Prada. They look beautiful. You can't criticize them, but there isn't showing their personality. Who are they? And when you go into a home where the person is connected to all the things in their home, they tell a story, and it's much more emotive, and it's individual, it's got personality, and that's what we are all setting out to do, isn't it? To actually,
I agree. I perfectly agree, Hazel, what you're saying. Art and interior designer objects, whatever, reflects even the personality of the owner, which you want that. You want your personality, and you don't want to look alike, I think, like, you know, like you were saying, all dressed like Prada, or you want to have that twist, that element to it.
Yeah.
Different.
It's I had this situation, sorry, I jump again. I had this situation with a friend of mine who's also a client, and so doing her house here in Switzerland, and she's not Swiss, she comes from another European country, and she's been living in many different continents, and what she has in terms of collection and objects totally reflects her life, and she's still ongoing, you know, like collecting things that reflect her life. And the very big challenge is like how to tell her story in this house. And I think this is very, very, very interesting.
That's interesting and also special because, again, as all of you have rightly mentioned, it reflects your personality. It also builds and challenges your personality as you learn and grow. And also, it's very important to understand who you are, but also reflect that in the spaces that you create and objects that you own. And also, collecting can become a bit addictive, as we know quite a few people, and including myself. I love to collect these, not just narratives, but also interesting works, and these are dialogues with artists. So that's incredible. With that, why don't we open up for a few questions? Please feel free to share your question in the Q&A box here or the chat, either or. And please start with your questions now, because we'll wrap up shortly. And while we have, questions popping in, I'll ask my own questions. Any top tips and insights for those of us who are interested in growing our art collection, but also showcasing art in spaces? I'll start with Mirta on that, and then I'll go to the other panelists.
Sarah, what is the question?
Sure. Sorry, I will repeat the question for everyone. What are your top tips or insights in starting or growing your art collection? And any other thoughts on showcasing or displaying that particular artwork? So love your thoughts, and I'll go to everyone else.
Sorry,
I think there's some audio somewhere.
Sorry.
No worries. We have a few more questions coming up as well. So once,
sorry.
no worries.
So the it's a difficult answer for me because honestly, each time, and this comes also to new artists, the encounters, of new artists came, and I wanted to do an example. I mean, years ago, I started to get interested in the work of a young artist that was already quite established, but not really famous. And she is now extremely famous, and Wangeshi Mutu. And I think that in this moment, not only because she's a Black and woman artist, but also because of that, I think this is a moment we all live where there's a lot of interesting scene, which is really expressed by the Black artist movement and the artist, and so this is what I look at a lot, and it's not because I look, but because they express something which is really interesting. Ibrahim Mahma, the Ghanaian artist, she's 33. So he is someone who is doing an extremely interesting work. So sometimes if I advise collectors, is also not only on the collecting objects, but obviously of looking at art and taking the risk also of choosing artists that have a direction, have a language, have a logic. And this is obviously sometimes more complicated because it's not domestic. Or if they have a collection where there is already an orientation, we have a different dialogue, and I look a lot of many different, I mean, advisors and collectors in this like global world. They have many possibilities. That's why I think that you can see a performance in Milan from a Zurich artist, or you can see the presentation of young artists, and then with your taste, you can advise your collector. And it's also a matter of fact that, you know, if they can follow this, or if they love, this is the moment also of painting, which is kind of a difficult practice, but different, so many possibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mirta. And what you mentioned right now relates very well to a question that came in. Camilla mentioned the need to define the language of a collection, and that is something that you, funnily enough, touched on right now. Can you expand a bit on that, and then I'll go to the other panelists.
The language of a collection, that you mean in which sense? Because the language of art is a logic of art that can be Italian or Chinese, is the same thing. I wanted to mention the Asian because actually the Western language is the language who dominates the art. And so the Chinese had to refer to the Western art in most of the more recent, I mean, the last, the more important or interesting Asian second generation, they always translate. And for me, it's also really interesting, this aspect of the research. If you think about artists like, I mean, Cunellis, that was a Greek artist based in Italy who spoke a Western language. He went to China and he worked with fragments of Chinese post-revolution to make Chinese works that can be very, very similar of the work of the many young Chinese artists based in New York nowadays. So it's the language in art is something that is extremely interesting and can be understood at different levels.
No, absolutely. And I know that there are different variations and interpretations of this question.
The Chinese artist I was mentioning is Paul Chan, who had the retrospective at the Schaulager. Is based in New York and is like the second generation. But he's Chinese in the way he used language, the Western language in his work. Ibrahim might use, like in his work in Ghana, is always artists, they dialogue each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I completely agree with you, Mirta, because the whole, again, dialogue and narrative and the research, for example, you know, my grandfather was an artist, and the whole construct around how artistry is written, there is, you know, modality of borrowing or highlighting some Western concepts and aligning them so that the rest of the world can understand, although there are rich kind of treasure troves of literature in each of the cultures across the world. So I absolutely agree with you there, Mirta. And Martin, because you worked in, again, you know, in Egypt, in various parts of Europe, how do you incorporate kind of the local language in terms of the visual language, artwork and artists versus sourcing artwork internationally? How does that work for you?
So once again, here it's also like a bit every time something different. Of course, in Egypt, let's say, like the local art scene that I knew best at a certain time. It's very particular. I mean, it's very Egyptian. It's very Oriental. Actually, the language is quite different. So it's another type of approach that suits very well, of course, when you are in Cairo, because it's something that totally makes sense, you know, even if you mix it with international artists. But here in Geneva, it's a bit different, especially that the people are much more, you know, classic and mainstream, and it's very, very difficult, you know, like to go a bit out of this mainstream, and so it's quite interesting. I try to mix. Also, here we have some local artists that I have the pleasure to know, or through some gallerist friends. We also have the opportunity to have some new sourcing of local artists. Also, talking about mixing, I have also a very good friend, and she's from Brazilian origin, and she's a gallerist, and she is doing both, bringing Brazilian artists in Switzerland and sending Swiss artists in Brazil. So the dialogue is quite also interesting. And you have kind of let's say, at this time, a dialogue also of the culture. So on top of it, it's quite interesting. But we have the chance here to be like in a very, very tiny city, a big village, but that is incredibly international. That's quite surprising for a city that is not even like 250,000 inhabitants, but we have like a proportion of huge nationalities, cultures, and different things. And so that's also a part of the job that is very, very interesting, when we have to find artists, local artists, international artists, and try to mix and to do the dialogue all between them.
Absolutely. And with our current artists as well as the Art Vault, we always have international artists, even though they've studied in the UK, because of course we wanted to start in London in UK since we're based here, and then expand this model internationally to incorporate artists from everywhere in the world, although our current artists are also international. So that's a very good point that you make there, Martin. And a final question for Hazel is around how the pandemic has affected your clients' choices and decisions and future plans, also with their homes and spaces, but in the context of art and spaces. This is a question from Avril, and I had the exact same question as well. So Hazel, please take it away.
I don't think the pandemic has changed how people feel about art in their home, because I think it's always been emotive and it's always been uplifting and it's always changed their home. I think people are spending more time at home, and maybe they're now looking at all the nooks and all the places and looking at what they've got and rearranging. So, you know, if you rearrange your art, rehang your art, maybe do a salon hang instead of what you had, or you've got open spaces where you didn't have it something, and maybe you don't want anything, but maybe you want to focus. So people are re-looking at their homes and definitely looking at replacing things, adding to things, moving things around, and looking out there. And I would say to people that if they're wondering what to do or how to go about it or change things, I would say be bold, actually. Go through, look online, look on platforms such as yours, even look on magazines, look at how art is being used in people's homes and see how it can be applied to theirs. Come and see us. We can help. Martin can help. Everyone on this platform here can help them. But I think it's about being brave and having a look and seeing how, if you look at we were saying there's a crossover with retail, fashion and art. And now more than ever, if you look at Loewe, Jonathan Anderson's using artists in fashion, there's the Erdem shop's got beautiful artwork. Even J. Crew, I think, is using artists. It's really out there and it can be applied in their own homes.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Hazel. That was a wonderful discussion. What I wanted to share is thank you so much for having having this conversation with us. Thank you everyone for joining. Please reach the panelists if you have any art or design or interior design related questions. Please reach us if you wish to collaborate, if you're an interior designer, art advisor, or private collector. We even work with various spaces, residences, to hospitality, restaurants, hotels, but also office spaces. But I know with the pandemic, these dynamics are shifting. So we are very happy to have these virtual consultations, as I'm sure all of you are in these days. And the idea is that with our launch on December 9th, we'll be showcasing works by artists of 2020 graduates from Central St. Martin's, one of the leading universities in the world, based in London. And next we'll have Slade, and after that we'll have Royal College of Art. So every month the focus will be on very interesting artworks and art created by artists who are graduating out of these universities, curated by, this is exciting, curated by student curators or artists, which is fantastic, again, to hear their voice and vision. And again, these works will be available directly for sale on our website. Already we have a fantastic collection of artists and artworks across media, again, as Cami mentioned, photography to printmaking to oil on canvas, and flat sculptures for now, and more three-dimensional sculptures coming up soon, and later video art as well. So lots of exciting news coming up. Please sign up to our newsletter. And Janet says thank you for the talk. So thanks again, everyone. Any final thoughts from anyone? Otherwise, we can wrap up.
I just wanted to add something when you were asking very quickly about how to showcase, and I was like some art and with a collection. I just had like this quick thought, and this was something that I wanted to do with a client. You were saying also about like many have sometimes too much pieces that you can't really like display and showcase all the time. I had this idea, and I hope I had the opportunity to do it, is maybe to make a rotation according to the season in a project. Let's say to have the winter display, the summer display, the autumn display, the spring display with different art, that the collector had. And according to the season, we change, I don't know, the paintings, the sculpture, and whatsoever from what you have.
That's a fantastic tip there from you, Martin. And we've received some fantastic insights, tips, and stories from everyone. So again, thank you everyone. And Cami, any final
Just
thoughts?
to add a small thing that right now there's going on Decorex, which is a trade art fair. So if you want to jump in and look at it, we're participating, of course. So that would be great. So that's a small thing. And no, I just like to thank you, everybody, all the panelists, and thank you, Sarah and the COVID team for creating these incredible club talks. And I hope to see you in other talks that we're soon will be organizing.
Wonderful. We have lots of thank yous and bravo from people. So
Yeah.
thanks everyone. Take care and have a lovely rest of the evening. Thanks.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Ciao.
Enjoy this.
Bye.
Panel.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you, Brad.
Bye.
Sarah, my friend.